So in this video, I want to answer a question a customer of mine asked me recently if I knew some good plants to grow in like zone 9 for the shade. And I told this person that I would love to make a video about it because it's been something I've been interested in recently. I'm doing such an overhaul of my property, different areas. In my backyard, the northern part, I finally have a clear vision in my head of what I want it to look like. And so that is an area where shade-loving perennials can go. There's also a part of my front yard I can put them in. This is something more for the future for me. Right now, I really can only work with my front yard, which is purely south-facing, direct sun. The side though has a stretch of trees though that give it some shade as it comes toward the house. So I've been able to kind of put some things in there. One of them is included in this list. Now, this list was carefully delineated for somebody. If you wanted to grow everything on this list all together, it would be incredible if you were an expert gardener, I think, and you could have flowers, fragrant flowers for the most part, because almost all the things on this list are fragrant, blooming from winter to fall. And even I can't do that though. I grow everything on this list perfectly in one area, but if you want to go ahead and try that, by all means, send me the pictures. I would love to see them. I'd be thrilled. But yeah, everything on this list is just very carefully came together to really, and I really wanted to make sure that they could work in the shade, that they're showy and fragrant, and the overall colors and shapes, the habits, they work together. So yeah, hopefully if you are in zone 7, 8, or 9 and you won't have you want to grow things more in shade, or that's what you have at your property, and you love fragrant flowers, multi-season interest, then this video is definitely for you. This is a great list for you. The first thing on this list is a Mahonia. Mahonia is hardy in zones 5 to 9, I believe. Now, I don't know a lot about Mahonia. I recently discovered it. I actually smelled a Mahonia. I don't know what the cultivar was at a nursery near me. The bloom period here where I live for that type, I guess, they were almost spent, so it wasn't as strong as I know it would be at peak bloom time, but I could still detect like a strong scent, and it was wonderful. Now, Mahonias do get medium-sized range, I guess, 4 to 6 feet high and wide, very fern-like and vertical in the habit, and just it's a beautiful plant. And the flowers are yellow and they kind of spray out in like a font or a fountain for like a good 2 to 3 weeks, late winter, early spring. The Marvel Mahonia is the one that I want to get, and I can't get it yet just because it is a shade-loving perennial in zones 5 through 9, and I just don't know where I would put it, so I have to wait a year. But I am going to do it this fall, I think, because it's a very, very, very beautiful plant, perfect for shade. So the next thing on my list is a Skimmia japonica. This is something that I've been kind of obsessed with lately. Now, this is a shade-loving perennial in zones 6 to 8. The male Skimmia pollinates the female Skimmia, and it's what creates the red berries, the very showy red berries around, like, I think fall or winter for the female. The female gets their red berries in the winter. That it has such a great winter appeal if it's grown with a male, or if you have a hermaphroditic variety of Skimmia. I don't know too many of the cultivars. I know the one I'm gonna be getting is from Monrovia. It's just a male Skimmia japonica. It has white flowers that bloom in early to mid-spring. Well, it's like March or April. It blooms in March and April, and it has white flowers, but they start off as red buds, or like a violet maroon kind of bud. Now, it blooms for that period in the spring, and then over the summer it's just leafed out, and then it starts creating those buds again in August. So throughout the fall, you still kind of get, and I think fall and winter, you get those beautiful clusters of buds that just work so well with this perfect, compact, tight little shrub that is very slow growing, I believe. I think it can grow pretty big. I'm just getting the male because I just want the fragrant flowers. And the males are known to be more fragrant, but I think I probably will get a female one in the future. However, these are purely like shade loving plants. Like you can have, obviously they'll bloom better if they get some sun, but I wouldn't give it more than 4 hours maybe of sun a day. 4 to 6 hours here in zone 8 where I'm at. It's just something I have to think about carefully about where I'm planning on put that. And I still don't even know where I'm gonna put mine, but I want it so badly because I've just been so interested in them. I think it's such an interesting plant and very beautiful with absolute multi-season interest. So the next thing on my list is a native azalea. Now, I also want to show a picture of my encore azaleas because I have 3 encore azaleas. They're the autumn sunburst. I have an idea of what I'm going to do with them right now. I don't like where they're at. Very, very beautiful. They're supposed to bloom 3 times in a year. Mine bloom, I think, like in May and in November. They definitely bloom better in like May, but they're supposed to be like repeat blooming, and they stay very small, the encore azaleas, and they are non-fragrant. The native azaleas are different. These are the deciduous azaleas that are kind of from this area. There's like a bazillion cultivars, so don't even like that's a hole I don't want to go down. I have 2 though, native azaleas. The first one is the Clear Creek azalea. I got it as an aromi azalea. These do get pretty big. They bloom in the spring for, I would say, like in May. They bloom, I would say, for the month of May. It's like a 2 to 3 week thing. Very fragrant flowers and also incredibly showy. So beautiful. I would choose a native azalea any day over an encore azalea. These are hardy in zones 7 to 10. I would say it is a partial shade loving perennial. The second native azalea I just recently purchased is the Gibraltar. It is an expiry azalea. This one is, I guess, as smaller as native azaleas go. It's more tight, I think. Beautiful orange flowers. The Clear Creek has like those beautiful yellow ones with white throats, and then the Gibraltar is like an orange, only lightly fragrant. So I have both of those. Only the Clear Creek right now I have planted, but the Gibraltar, I'm not quite sure where I think that's going in that new space I'm doing. That is a really, really good one to grow. So the next one on my list is the Primula, the Primrose. This is something I think I'm going to enjoy more in the future. For one thing, I'm terrible at sowing them. Zones 4 to 8. It is difficult to talk about the fragrance of these because as far as the regular Primula vulgaris goes, or Primula acaulis, I'm not really entirely sure of the difference. That I found the yellow ones to be, it's actually last spring, it was one of the things I loved the most. I smelled the whole spring. Like, I was shocked at the yellow primrose, how fragrant that was. And the blue and white also, I think, are a little bit fragrant in that. But I knew I wanted to grow them like every year, and just they're also very, very beautiful. Those really bright, bold colors. Primrose is something that is almost full shade though. It's not something I've really found a good place to put. Last year, like, I had it on my front porch, but as it got into late spring, I just noticed it didn't really matter. Here in the South, like, it doesn't even matter if it's like direct sun. It's just the heavy heat, the high heat and the heavy humidity, or I just feel like it just started to decline, and it didn't really matter how much I kept watering it. I knew like it was just going out. And so it's something that here I would have to have in full shade, but it's only for the spring, really, for where I live. It does bloom like all spring. I mean, it's something you can deadhead. But if you live in the like up northern Midwest or up north, like, Primrose is something you could have everywhere probably, and bloom for multiple seasons. And the one I wanted to talk about though is the Ballerina series. There's like 7 different cultivars, and they're all purported to be fragrant. At the nursery I was at recently, it was a different nursery. They got 3 in. They got the Amethyst Ice, I think the Buttercup, and the Valentine. I got the Amethyst Ice and the Valentine. Some of the plants, they were in 4-inch planters, were in bloom, and I couldn't detect scent, but it might have just been the time of the day, or they weren't, I don't know. I couldn't detect scent, and I have a very sharp sense of smell, so I'm hoping that whenever mine start blooming soon, I'll be able to detect scent and they'll be fragrant, because I know that there is fragrance in Primula. These are like a double flowering variety that are just very, very, very beautiful, very showy. I just know that one of the selling points is that they're supposed to be, all those cultivars are supposed to be fragrant. So, and I actually have them planted with I'm going to be planting them. I'm thinking of planting them with my Clear Creek native azalea, which is sort of like in a planter, I guess, a stone. It was like a retaining wall kind of planter thing I had to do there. I'm doing that whole area in my front yard is kind of a headache. I think I'm going to create steps actually in that spot. It's important to note that Primrose is a very, very, very small, short ground cover kind of annual or perennial, depending on if you're in those zones, 4 to 8, I believe. It's something that would go in front of other things that are more medium, small to medium size. Like, for example, I would think Primrose would look beautiful with Skimmia. Both of them will be blooming at the same time and in the shade, and fragrant and just very beautiful. Like, that's a perfect pairing right there. Daphne. is something that I've just fallen head over heels in love with. Technically I have 3 Daphnes. I'm using one as gonna be like a mother plant to create my own cuttings, but there's different kinds of Daphnes. The majority of them bloom in the spring, late winter, spring. For example, I'm right now I have my Daphne Oreo marginata, which is the variegated version of Daphne, which is like it's like January to March blooming. It's an extended bloom period, I think. Mine is only just now coming into like peak bloom, but it started in like mid-January, and it is so beautiful, and it's in such a beautiful pot. I keep it like in the porch at this time of the year, and I'll move it to the back porch as it gets hotter. But stepping out my front door every day has just been so wonderful because it's such an incredible scent. But I also am growing a summer ice Daphne. Now the summer ice Daphne is more for this list. These are all Daphne are shade loving. They have to be grown in shade. You cannot have these in full sun. They will die. And a lot of people say Daphne are hard to grow anyway. I haven't had any trouble with them yet, knock on wood. My summer ice didn't have many flowers on it, and it's still kind of small. I'm hoping it gets bigger. I'm actually thinking I'm gonna have to move it, and those things do not like their roots to be disturbed, so we'll see how that goes. I don't want to lose that, but I noticed that the summer ice flowers are the scent is similar to paper whites actually, but I still loved that very much. Like, it's just not the same scent as the winter flowering Daphne. And the zones for Daphne are like 6 to 9. By the way, the summer ice blooms in spring, summer, and fall. It's like a 6-month bloom period. It can start in like late winter and last till first frost or even after. Like, it's just incredibly beautiful, variegated foliage. It gets really big, 4 to 6 feet wide and tall, and fragrant flowers, very showy. And it's perfect for the shade. And you can also control the size of that very easily if you want. Canterbury Bells. I've only tried to grow these once. They're biennial when you sow them, and I really wanted that sky blue Canterbury Bell. It was not difficult to sow. It's just took such a long time. I ended up losing them. I forgot why. This is like 2 years ago. I wanted them behind one of my ponds. It blooms like in May through July, May to July. Again, it's not going to bloom that first year. It'll bloom the next in that summer, early summer, late spring, early summer. These are non-fragrant. And it's definitely the kind of thing that reminds me of like larkspur or foxglove. It can get tall, but those flowers are so beautiful. It's actually one of those things that I think more because of the origin or historically what it represents is why I wanted to have them as a companion plant to other things. If you're in zones 4 to 10, it's just anywhere in that area. I mean, this would be great, and it is shade tolerant. Astilbe is going to be grown in zones 3 to 8. This is something that's going to require partial shade to full shade, and it blooms I think anywhere from like early to late summer, and I've read some people say you can get it to rebloom. I think it just blooms for a few weeks. They're incredibly beautiful plume-like flowers that are supposed to be lightly fragrant. The amethyst Astilbe is what I want to grow actually, and I planted some other various colors of Astilbe in that new space I have coming towards the house where there's a lot more shade, with some peonies recently actually. Peonies, Astilbe, and Liatris are the only things I've planted in that area, but I'm pulling up so many things and taking down so many branches that I've kind of made a mess there, and I even cut off a bud of one of my peonies, a flame peony, which kind of upset me. Anyway, yeah, Astilbe is a great one for shade. Now, the last thing I ever thought I'd be talking about was a Hosta. But actually there's multiple varieties of Hosta that do have fragrant flowers. The cultivar that I got called Fragrant Bouquet, which I'll show you here, was so beautiful. First of all, they're very beautiful, low to the ground, sort of ground cover plants that have large, like elephant-like leaves. Some of them have very cool variegated forms, and the flowers are also, even if they're non-fragrant, are so beautiful, because when they bloom they can be that beautiful, like anywhere from sky blue to a lavender. The Fragrant Bouquet had giant white flowers with a hint of lavender that were very, very fragrant, and it's just, oh my god, I fell in love with that. These are full shade though. They only bloom for a few weeks, and it can happen like anywhere, I think, depending on where you're at in the summer. For me, it was in June, late June, early July. Zones 3 to 8 for Hosta. The next thing on this list is Phlox. That's hardy in zones 4 to 8. I haven't really grown the typical garden phlox. I'm gonna be growing it this season. I didn't know that it was fragrant, but phlox is fragrant. I don't know the zoning for the kind of phlox, the hardiness for the one that I have been growing, the one that I love. In this video, I want to talk about Xalusionskaya capensis, which is the midnight candy phlox. It is so underrated and unused and unknown, and it's like, they're like these pinwheel flower, white snowflake flowers with like a violet reverse. Smaller annuals to be used more as like front runners to a space. They can bloom all summer if you deadhead them. Very difficult to grow from seed, but I've gotten pretty good at it. Midnight candy phlox, that one that I'm talking about, is extremely fragrant, unlike regular garden phlox, which is I think going to be more lightly fragrant. The garden centers, they are like lightly fragrant to me, but they are a lot showier. And phlox is something that can work in the shade, I would say like partial shade, but I am sowing a lot of midnight candy phlox right now. As a matter of fact, I have a lot of little seedlings of it coming up right now, so depending on how that goes, it's working out a lot better than it did last year. It's going to be better in full sun, but you can make it work in partial shade. The alpine forget-me-nots are a kind of forget-me-not. They're like the Alaskan forget-me-nots that I've been growing. Typical forget-me-nots aren't fragrant, and so, but the alpine forget-me-nots are. They're like a sun-loving perennial here in 4 to 8, zones 4 to 8, but they can also handle partial shade. They don't get too big, just like the phlox. Like these are gonna be like your more like foot tall kind of things. I actually have grown the aquatic forget-me-nots, and I love those, and I think those are fragrant too, actually. Forget-me-nots are the kind of thing that bloom in the spring, but the alpine forget-me-nots bloom in the summer. The next thing on this list is Nicotiana. Nicotiana alata is what I've grown, and I'll try to show a picture here. The one I had a beautiful front of my main garden. It was so beautiful what I had there. And actually the picture here doesn't do it justice, because I changed some stuff out and it got even more beautiful. I wanted like a rainbow of color, and I'm planning on doing that again this summer. And this spring I'm going to be sowing the perfume blue and perfume white Nicotiana alata, and I think I'd even like to sell those too. Nicotiana sylvestris is that's going to be like your shade tolerant Nicotiana. You can grow any Nicotiana in partial shade. It's going to do better in full sun, but the woodland or the sylvestris cultivar or variety, you could grow that in a like mostly shade if you wanted to. And those flowers they appear to be more pendulous, I guess you could say, and longer and narrow, but still just as incredibly fragrant. These don't get big. These are medium sized. Nicotiana alata is like really 1 to 2 feet tall, and it's just covered in flowers in this like all summer. However, if you are growing Nicotiana, my biggest piece of advice is to buy BT. Nicotiana is self-sowing, I believe. Don't take my word on that, but it is only going to be your hardy perennial in zones 10 or 11. However, that's what I read online. This is false, because I just now thought my green Nicotiana, I moved into my backyard. It's right over there. It is still alive, and it wasn't even pruned, and that's going to come back to life here soon. So, and I'm in zone 8A. The last thing on my list is sort of two things, and it's not something I thought I would mention because I'm not too big on it, because they're hydrangea. They're very beautiful flowers. They're very showy, and I just think here in the South they're used pretty much everywhere, and I get it because they are incredibly beautiful. I'm just not one of those people that really, I don't know, I feel like breeders, like there's just so much changing all the time, and they're like mutating like classic things into something else completely different. I mean, when I was a kid, I would have never like conceived of a small hydrangea that was like a door for like the 1 to 2 feet wide and tall, but they are beautiful. The example I saw online, peewee oakleaf hydrangea, is zones 5 to 9, I believe. That is going to be a dwarf variety that can grow in the shade, blooms all summer, very beautiful panicles of white flowers. I don't plan on ever getting it, but this could just be a great thing for this list. The other one in the big leaf category, by the way, I have 2 traditional big leaf hydrangeas, but they're like big. I've done a video on pruning back old ones, but the one example I saw online of a great one would be the Let's Dance Blue Jangles. I think it's a proven winner's variety with, I mean, incredibly beautiful flowers. The pH is what's going to dictate, that pink or that blue. Both of these cultivars are very compact or dwarf varieties. All hydrangeas need at least partial shade. You can't grow hydrangeas in full sun. I would say partial shade to full shade is what you're going to need to see hydrangeas thrive. The big leaf hydrangea, like the blue jangles, is going to be zones 5 to 11, where the oak leaf, that peewee, is going to be 5 to 9. And if you're interested in also playing with soil pH to change flower color, it'd be a great start. That is everything on this list. I feel like I've been talking forever. Hopefully this didn't overwhelm you. Remember, this is more of a guide. This isn't like, and I'm also not an expert gardener. I just know that my experience up until now has led me to believe this would be a really great list for somebody who is growing in the shade, in a zone like an area like mine, to have multiple season interest and nice, beautiful flowers, fragrant flowers. And hopefully the person, you know, that I was speaking with, hopefully this helps that person. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed watching this.